I requested one of my groups to do something on trees. So the theme this month is coastal scenes. So I've been looking for some sort of coastal trees to fit in. And I remember I did that. This is a photo of a painting I did quite a few years ago, and this incorporated the coast and some trees. And that's a photo of the same sort of scene. So maybe I might use that one. And then I found this one, which was slightly, so that was the demo I did on Tuesday, and I've just done a little bit more to it here. And it might need a little bit more down the bottom here, really. So it's a sort of an interpretation of that rather than an exact copy of representation. So doing a little bit on watercolours. And the other thing, I've brought a couple of books in of artists I quite like. And I thought with watercolours, it's quite a good idea to look at artists' work rather than just kind of look at photographs and try and think how to interpret it in watercolours, because quite often you get a few ideas of what works, what can be effective in watercolour. And my taste is for slightly sketchier watercolours rather than trying to replicate a photographic look. So that's my particular taste. Okay, so something like this, I would want to get some sort of background washes down first. And I started mixing a couple of colours. Just go back and mix a bit more of this one. So the sky, I've got one that I've pre-done that I'll use in a minute, because obviously we need to let that dry. So a little bit of blues and a tiny bit of either crimson or magenta. I think that's magenta. And I'm going to use a combination of these two. So it looks like there was a little bit of cloud in the sky, but not too much. With watercolours and things like skies, reasonable sized brush, and I find these natural hair brushes are good because they hold lots of moisture. So something that will hold it to lots of paint and can then work nice and quickly. I'm trying to leave a little bit of gaps here and there for possible clouds, and I've been a little bit random about it, and then perhaps go in with slightly stronger colour. So just going straight into the colour so that I don't make it too over wet. Once I've got a wet area, I then would put slightly drier paint in so that it doesn't push the colour out of the way. So let's try that. And then these bits at the bottom, I'm just going to go in with clean water and just very slightly dampen this bit, just leave some slightly softer edges. So get rid of the paint and just kind of soften out the edge a little bit. Don't want to put too much water back in there, because, as I say, you just create those sort of cauliflower looks and push the paint out of the way. And these dribbles at the bottom, I can just mop up. That one. And then onto some sort of colour sand. I've used a similar sort of colours on the brush. So a little bit of raw sienna, which is a bit too yellow on its own. So either some brown or some of the crimson mixed in. It's a really good idea to have a little bit of scrap paper to just test your colours out before you go onto the paper. And I find what looks, quite dark in the palette will look very light on the page. So again, I'll go back to this and like that. And that's very pale, so maybe go in with some stronger colour there. So take some of the moisture out. So again, a slightly darker mix of the same. And I'll add a little bit of blue in, just so it's not too bright. And a lot darker at the foreground. Like that. I'm not going to tackle the beach arts, I'm really just going to look at the sand and the sky and a little bit of trees. So that would be a good basis to, I can now let that dry and then work something over the top for trees. So I've got one that I had to go at earlier. Actually, I'll just dry that bit off so it doesn't run back. So this is one that's dried off. And then really just kind of working my way through these darker greens now. I'll go for a slightly smaller brush. Again, these are sort of cypress trees, so they're not very bright summery greens. So I'm going to mix a colour, maybe a little bit green in there, but I will then add some red, just to grey that down a little bit. So that's, to me, a little bit more like the colours that I'm getting here, like a sort of greeny grey. So one way would be to paint wet into wet. So I could slightly dampen some of this, perhaps with a big brush. Show you a couple of different tactics. So just getting that wet so that I don't lift the paint off. Get some nice kind of soft edges that way. And this could be just underpainting and then paint some more textured paint over the top. And then another approach would be just to go in more of a, let's mix a bit of paint, more of a kind of dry brush approach. So just make a slightly stronger mix. Go with darks into that now. Maybe stronger, something else. So that's kind of wet in wet approach, and then working onto the dry paper. It's not particularly textured paper this, but if you had a bit more texture, you could pick up use the texture of the paper to help. So let's go for I might even use this bristle brush because this is a bit rougher. Yeah, that's a bit easier to get some sort of textures. Yeah, I think that works quite reasonably. Just a bit of paint. And then while that's still wet, I've got some of the darker colours in there. So, yeah, a couple of different approaches. I think, for me with watercolour, a lot of the learning is just playing with the paint. Fairly simple subjects, just having lots of goes. Keep it very sketchy. Don't get too involved in the drawing until you're really confident with pushing the paint around and making it do what do interesting things.
I guess there's more control if you use your bristle brush. There seems to be.
Yeah, I think it's that. I think
more detail.
It's kind of more detail. I think with the trouble with this one that I'm not really. It's a bit too sharp or too almost a bit too graphic for me. The marks. There's a little bit of a fuzziness in places there, which I quite like. I think if I had a bit more texture on the paper, you could try and get that bit drier. Yeah, sometimes you get that kind of dry brush effect like that. But it works a lot better if you've got a rougher paper. Otherwise, what I want to avoid is sort of like something that's too much like a stylized kind of graphic. a graphic mark. So yeah, it's almost too hard edge, just using the soft brush. So that seems to work a bit better. This one here with the, once that's dry, and that's starting to dry, or it's almost dry, you could then go in and do a little bit more, and that might be quite nice. So you've got a bit of a mixture of the softer edges and but something to play with if you're contrasting watercolours. Okay.